What is up?
Insert preferred name of reference here.
It is your boy Dashy, back again. Last week we ended up making a video about the new drift class in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. You might have seen it. It was a video where I showcased the stat differences, the real stats of the drift class in comparison to some of the other classes in CTR to show that the top speed and all that stuff was a little bit misleading compared to what it actually was. It was a video that was mostly well received, but I got about 40% of the comments were pretty negative. Good chunk of them were people that were mad because I said the word Fortnite in the beginning, so I guess that's my own fault for making a joke, I guess. The other, like 20% of them were people that, I don't know, just wanted to call me a liar for whatever reason, despite having the stuff literally being shown right in front of their face. Even though, ironically, a couple days later, a larger YouTuber ended up making a video using basically the exact same tests that I did. It actually ended up being on the exact same track too. That was kind of weird. I don't know if he pulled some sort of inspiration from somebody, or I don't know. I'm just going out on a limb here. But as soon as he did it, people were more than positively taking that and accepting it as fact. So I don't know what to say about that, but either way, let's get started. I woke up today to a couple pings in different discords informing me that the new patch that dropped last night, which fixes a bunch of the GP issues for Nina's the spooky GP, also notes that it fixes or tweaks the drift stats. And they asked me if I could do some testing. So I got to work. This time, I decided to do a little bit better testing, I guess, for what it's worth. Even though you could easily tell and see the differences from the last test, this one's way more concrete, way harder to argue with, because it's literally the exact same. So, let's get right into it. I ended up doing some tests. The first thing I ended up finding out, which is kind of sad to me, but whatever, is that they actually ended up removing the Sacred Fire mechanic from the drift class, where you get 3 perfect boosts and you get Sacred Fire back. Instead, it's literally just another stat class basically now. So that's kind of disappointing. I thought that was actually a really interesting mechanic to introduce, but now it's just basically kind of like how the other classes are. It's just with a different balance of stats. So that kind of sucks. Now let's get right into it. I'm going to tell you right off the bat what these tests are going to basically tell you. The drift class, from what I can see, has literally the worst acceleration out of all of the classes. It even accelerates worse than the speed class. Its top speed is a little bit higher than acceleration, but a little bit slower than speed still. And its turning is actually about the same as balanced now, which means it's a little bit less than the turning class, but it's a little bit more than the acceleration class. That's all you really need to know, but if you want to see the test, you can continue forward. The first test that I'm going to show you is the straight line off the start line on Coco Park. No touching the steering at all, just hit X when it hits green so you don't get a boost start, and then drive until Aku picks you up. The reason this test is like this is because it tells you how the acceleration factors in, because once boosts are factored in, acceleration becomes kind of a non-factor. What you're going to end up seeing is that the speed class and the acceleration class basically get picked up right about the same time. The speed class gets picked up like literally 1 frame sooner. And then you get that followed by the drift class, and then the balanced class, and then the turning class. So this kind of tells you a little bit right off the bat, especially as you watch it in slow motion. You can see that the drift class is the slowest one to kind of get off the line, and then it ends up catching back up. So it does tell you that the speed is a little bit higher than it was before. The next test that we end up doing is off the line with the boost start. This is with a perfect boost with the gauge completely full. And what you end up seeing here is that the speed class gets picked up first. Again, no surprise here. And then the drift class and the acceleration class get picked up basically at the same time. Again, you can't really see it because this is a literal frame difference, but the drift class does actually get picked up 1 frame sooner than the acceleration class. And then followed by that, it basically comes down the line. From right to left, you have the speed class gets picked up, then the drift class, then the acceleration class, then the balance class, and then the turning class. Which is pretty much to be expected, because that's the order of the speed stats from the classes. The next test that we ended up doing is the what I call yellow fire, because I need to make this very clear. In the original CTR community, the term yellow fire referred to the fire that you get from 3 boosts. It's not sacred fire. The sacred fire and yellow fire aren't the same in my terminology, which is again the same as what it was in the original. So the next test involved building up reserves for an entire lap, just getting the yellow fire for all 5 classes. Again, the drift class no longer gets sacred fire from doing 3 perfect boosts. Again, that kind of sucks. But so we build up as much reserves as possible, start our timer basically as soon as we cross the finish line, and we try to line it up pretty straight so we can actually just drive straight into the pickup range, just like how we did for the first 2. Admittedly, these next 2 tests are a little bit harder to do because it involves literally trying to get the exact same line. So when we have a difference of like literally 1 frame or so, it's kind of hard to really say if that's really what it is, but I'm going to go with my direct results regardless. So what you end up seeing with the yellow fire from the line is pretty much what you expect. The speed class ends up getting picked up first, followed by the drift class, followed by the acceleration class. Those are all within a couple frames of each other, and then that's followed by the balanced and then turning classes. Again, they aren't all perfectly lined up. The acceleration class is a little bit further to the left, so maybe it would have actually been about the same time as drift, but I don't think so, because from my experience already, I've seen that drift does actually go a little bit faster than acceleration now. So I'm just going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say that it is, in fact, going to be faster than acceleration here on the pickup, which, again, makes sense. The final test we do is the one with Sacred Fire, where I basically do the exact same as the last one, except I do it with hitting a boost pad at the beginning and then gaining a shitload of reserves, and then doing the same thing where I try to line it up and drive straight down the center with the hearts of the center line, and just don't touch the steering to the best of my abilities and wait until Aku picks you up. What you end up seeing here is, I'm sure, what you would have expected. The speed class gets picked up first, followed by the drift class, then followed by the acceleration class, straight up in order, all the way down to turning from right to left. Again, this makes sense, in my opinion. This is now closer in line to what the stats tell you. For an extra little added thing, I actually ended up doing a turning test, and the best way that I could decide to really do this is to literally just go off the starting line and hold to the left and kind of note, the turning radius for all of them. It's a little bit hard to judge how different they are, since the accelerations and speeds are a little bit different, but what you're going to end up seeing just from a quick playthrough is that speed obviously has the worst turning, acceleration has the second worst turning, as it also falls into the pond. Then you'll notice that drift actually doesn't fall into the little pond, and neither does balanced and turning. Now, if we actually stop it at the frame for each of these where they're at their widest, you'll notice that the speed class, again, is at the widest, the acceleration is second widest, but the balanced and the drift class actually end up being basically on the exact same line, and then turning is like way more, which again makes sense. So this is just a little thing to kind of tell you about where the turning stat is. Again, I had people asking me what the flick that I was referring to was for the drift and speed characters. Pretty much anybody that actually has played all of the classes should be able to know exactly what I'm talking about. When you start a drift as a drift or a speed character, you'll notice that it kind of hangs outward a little bit and then picks up like a normal turning radius. And then when you exit the drift, it also kicks out left or right depending on which direction you were drifting. The other 3 classes don't have that, and it's exclusive to the drift and speed classes, which is the added skill cap of it, because it is a little bit harder to get used to if you're used to something else. That's gonna be everything. My final thoughts on this are basically now that I think it's kind of cool that they ended up adjusting some of this stuff to make it more along the lines of what it shows. I do think it's kind of disappointing that they got rid of the Sacred Fire gimmick, because I think it's kind of cool, because it gave a little bit better online balancing. Like if you get hit by an item, it gives you the opportunity to actually come back, because you don't have, if on tracks that are really scarce for pads, you can just get fire back. Whereas Other tracks, like, you just could never come back. But, you know, obviously with the stats for the way it was in the beginning, the Sacred Fire that you got was slower than Acceleration's Yellow Fire, and especially slower than Speed's Yellow Fire, so it didn't even matter if you ever got Sacred Fire back. You were basically still slower than the top two classes. So now it's actually more of a little bit of a viable class. I would kind of say that this is like a actual good intermediate class for if you're good at acceleration and not good at speed, but you want to try to transition into speed. Getting used to that flick is pretty hard. If you're used to acceleration, like I've literally been only playing as acceleration for the last 3 months. So for me, the speed's flick is a little bit hard to get used to. But this class, because it actually turns a little bit harder, and it's a little bit more manageable, it's kind of a good introductory phase into how to control it all. So I think it's actually a pretty viable class, and even still, if you're actually good at controlling it, it's going to be better than acceleration now, because it's just faster. So that's really all that I gotta say about this now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Maybe now this class is actually pretty decent, and hopefully people are a little bit happier with the way that this is now. That's all I got for you, and I'll see you guys later.